Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts about the 40k universe. I am your host, Gershwin, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about the Blood Jaguars as we get into their history. If you don't know who the Blood Jaguars are, please click on the link above. That's going to take you to part 1 where we explain who the Blood Jaguars are pretty thoroughly. This is more of the story behind their founding, so you get more of their details. And again, guys, if you guys have any suggestions for Space Marine chapters or any other homebrew chapter that you guys would like us to talk about, comment down below. Don't forget to put suggestion followed by the suggestion of the topic or the chapter. With that said, let's get into 40 facts about the Blood Jaguars. Tenochtitlan's peaceful history was shattered in the year 427 of the 35th millennium, when a warp storm engulfed the planet's star systems, isolating its inhabitants from the Imperium. When the storm commenced, the stars went dark and the sun's light dimmed. Given the sun holds deep significance to the people of Tenochtitlan, as they have believed to be the presence of the God Emperor, there was mass panic. Thousands were sacrificed on the sacred altar to appease the angry gods, but they remained silent. Tenochtitlan remained in perpetual dusk, the wan rays of the sun only barely able to maintain life. Catastrophic famine was all but certain if order failed. Acres of jungle were cleared for agriculture, and vast number of citizens went forth into the wilderness to find food. With communications even between hives failing, each settlement became largely autonomous. Population levels steadily decreased, mainly through violence, hunger, and ever-constant sacrifice. It is said that the blood never dried on the great altar of the sun in Tenochtitlan during the whole long night. Such were the numbers of those offered upon it. With the sun fading, it was perhaps inevitable that some citizens would turn to the dark powers. Tenochtitlan had always walked a fine line between faith and heresy, thanks to its practices of human sacrifice, and with the coming of the long night, the line was crossed. Whispers spread that the sun was darkened because the emperor had died, and his light was fading. Hope, fear, and desperation drove thousands into the worship of the ruinous powers. Hives began to discover hidden altars in the depths of their structures, where citizens had been sacrificed upon, and their hearts offered to chaos. Acts of terrorism against imperial officials and offices sharply increased. To maintain order, the Blood Jaguars were called upon to purge the hives. The reputation of the chapter was well known to imperial officials on Tenochtitlan, but they felt that they had no other choice. The first hive to be cleansed was Tenochtitlan. Level by level, hab by hab, the Blood Jaguars relentlessly sought out any trace of corruption. The cults present in the hives made the suicidal choice to engage the Blood Jaguars openly, attacking the Astartes in a great battle on the Holy Square before the Temple of the Sun. They believed their dark god would grant them victory. They did not. After the massacre at the temple, the remaining cultists on Tenochtitlan began to slip away from the hives, sensing that remaining hidden from the Blood Jaguars would be impossible. They sought the protection of the deep jungles and began to rebuild in their numbers. The Astartes purge continued for 11 years before finally being declared successful. The comparatively small number of cultists caught in the later years was considered proof of effectiveness, but the Blood Jaguars were not convinced. They sensed that the battle was far from over. Evidence for the cult's continued existence was dramatically revealed in the year 484 of the 35th millennium, when a vast horde of screaming cultists swept out of the jungles and besieged the hive of Hexoctlan. Taken by surprise, the few imperial defenders, mainly Arbites, were destroyed in the first few hours. The cultists proceeded to butcher nearly 3,000 citizens on impromptu altars to appease their patron god. Yet, as quickly as they arrived, they departed, melting back into the jungles. The Blood Jaguars were unable to respond fast enough. Time and time again, the cultists followed this pattern. Small groups would instill terror by snatching captives from farms or outposts, while larger groups raided settlements and even hives. The Blood Jaguars seemed powerless to stop this method of attack. Their numbers were too few and their communication lines severed due to the warp storm. punitive raids into the jungles netted few cultists, as the Astartes' formations were too obvious. The Codex Astartes called for stronger defenses and surgical strikes to defeat their type of attack, but neither option was viable. New tactics were called for. Captain Chipetotec of the 3rd Company was the first to suggest new methods. He argued for turning the terror tactics of the cultists against them. Instead of combat assaults, individual brothers would be trained to operate independently, using the jungle as cover and sowing terror and destruction in the heart of their enemies. In the dense jungles, long-range weaponry would be useless, so the Blood Jaguars should focus their training on hand-to-hand combat. Totec faced great resistance from within the chapter, but the captain was given permission to follow these new tactics. Results at this point were more important than doctrines. Captain Totec's idea bore fruit. For the next 2 years, his company successfully managed to eliminate 3 cultist groups in their assigned area. The attacks on Imperial citizens dropped by 57%. Intelligence gained from captives indicated that the terror tactics were working, as cultists were fleeing to other regions, terrified of Totec's jungle wrath. Following his success, other Blood Jaguar companies began to follow his doctrines, but it was only after the catastrophic Battle of the Monastery that they were adopted in a large scale. Realizing that the Blood Jaguars were proving to be far more troublesome than originally thought, cult leaders planned to go after the source, and planned a mass assault on the Blood Jaguars' fortress monastery. 5 separate cults, each dedicated to one of the major chaos gods, came together for the attack. The Blood Jaguars presented at the monastery included the chapter master, the whole of the 4th Company, and the majority of the company's vehicles and tech marines. The attackers did not achieve complete surprise. 3 Company intelligence had hinted at a major attack in the sector, and the Blood Jaguars were on the alert. Nevertheless, they did not anticipate that the cultists would be so bold as to attack the monastery of the gods. When the attack began, calls for aid were sent out to all the Blood Jaguar forces on Tenochtitlan, once the scale of the assault became clear. The defense of the fortress would have been far more effective had the 4th Company not fallen to the Black Rage. Disdaining their superior positions in cover, they swept out to engage the cultists in close combat. Every brother who fell claimed 100 cultists, but numbers were on the side of the attackers. By the time reinforcements from the 3rd Company arrived under Captain Totec, the monastery had fallen. Rushing inside, the 3rd Company commander was just in time to see the heart of the chapter master being offered as a sacrifice to an unspeakable warp entity. Such was the strength of the offering that the demon prince began to manifest, but Totec ripped the cultist priest apart and disrupted the ritual. The demon screamed in defiance as the warp reclaimed it. Totec stared into its eyes with pure hatred. With their chapter master dead and their monastery in ruin, the Blood Jaguars turned to the one brother who had managed to defeat the cultists. Captain Chipetotec was made chapter master, and his new tactics were put into full effect. Having lost their vehicles and most of the tech marines, there was little other option. Totec refused to rebuild the monastery, declaring that until the long night ended, the Blood Jaguar's place was in the field, holding off the forces of the ruinous powers. Perhaps when Master Totec made his declaration, he did not expect the storm to last as long as it did. For 200 years, Tochit was cut off from the Imperium. During this time, the Blood Jaguars put Totec's teachings into full effect, disdaining the Codex Astartes. Cultist numbers slowly decreased as their hidden strongholds were purged. By the year 631 of the 35th millennium, the Blood Jaguars' victory seemed complete, and yet the long night remained. Clearly, there remained some final acts left to play. The climax of the long night struck late in the 631st year of the 35th millennium, when a hidden cult in the hive of Toltec enacted a blasphemous ritual. Desperate to end the long night, they seized the governor of Toltec and offered his heart in sacrifice, along with the lives of every cult member in the hive. The ritual succeeded, but not in the way that the cultists expected. Instead of the warp storm vanishing, reality was torn asunder, and the demonic horde poured forth into the hive. At its head was the demon prince Cortez, the same who had nearly been summoned in the monastery of the gods. The hive's population stood no chance. Warp spawn slaughtered every citizen, but their lust for killing allowed the blood jaguars enough time to reach the hive. What followed was the battle that entered into legend. It culminated in the chapter master Tortek ripping out the heart of Cortez atop the hive spire. As he stood there and offered the heart up to the sun, the skies cleared and the light of the Sun Emperor flooded back. Although at dreadful cost, the long night was ended. Imperial authorities were astonished when Tenochtitlan emerged from the warp storm. The blood jaguars themselves were equally amazed when they were informed that the Imperium had written off Tenochtitlan as lost, as the warp storm had lasted for over 2,000 years. Imperial authorities on Tenochtitlan explained that the long night had for them lasted merely 200 years, a fact which the Inquisition went into great length to examine, before finally attributing the time dilation to the nature of the warp itself. And those were 40 facts about the blood jaguars. And that is part 2 of the blood jaguar series. There's going to be another part, so please subscribe to the channel to get that. And I gotta say, reading that lore just inspires me to create my own lore for my own chapter. I initially, before I was going to start the Imperial Fist, I wanted to create my own chapter. I wanted it to be a black and white chapter, but it's just so difficult to paint black that I kind of got discouraged. But the more I read fan-made chapters, the more I want to create my own. So if you guys out there created your own chapter, you created your own lore, what keeps you guys motivated? Like what pushed you to complete that? Because I kind of need that in order for me to continue that old Space Marine alternative chapter that I wanted to create. And if you have your own lore and all that stuff for your chapter, I would love to read it. If you have it on any of the forums, send me that way and I would love to read it. And if you want us to put it on the channel, just let me know. You could private message us on YouTube, or you could just comment down below. It would be best just for you to comment down below if that is your situation. But again, guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you guys so much for being subscribers. Don't forget to share this on Facebook, Twitter, because it really helps out the channel and it allows us to continue to put out more lore videos for you guys. If you guys want to support us a little bit more, jump on over to Patreon. A simple $1, which is less than what you spend on super glue. I went to the dollar store the other day and the super glue was not $1. How does that work? I'm at the dollar store. But yeah, if you want to support us, it's a simple $1 a month, and it gives us the opportunity to give you more videos on YouTube and on Patreon. So link is going to be in the bottom. Help us out if you can. If you can't, simply by liking, commenting, and sharing, it helps out a lot. And I'll see you guys tomorrow with more lore on the Blood Jaguars. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.